slides to share. So as mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you about careers in IP outside of academia. So I thought I'd just start by telling you a little bit about my background. So I started off doing an integrated master's course at the University of Sheffield in genetics and microbiology. So that was back in 2009 now. And then during my master's year, there was a research project looking into the bacteria that waking up of the bacteria that causes the disease tuberculosis. And there was funding to carry on and do a PhD in that. So I ended up staying in the same lab and doing another 4 years in the lab. Throughout that lab experience, I found myself getting more and more specialized into one particular area of science, whereas I wanted to keep my interests broad. And the other key thing that I wanted a permanent job. I wasn't particularly interested in becoming a postdoc and kind of having that anxiety of finding that next contract or having to relocate every kind of 3 to 5 years. During my undergrad, I had heard of like patents and IP in terms of like I'd heard of it from Dragon's Den, and there was a little bit about patents in one of my plant modules. But it wasn't until I did the Young Entrepreneur Scheme. It's a competition where during my PhD where you form a mock biotech startup company. And it was there that I met a patent attorney and kind of found out more about the career. When I was writing up my thesis, I started applying for jobs in IP, and I got offered a job as a patent examiner. So I did that for a couple of years. So that they are the people, they're civil servants and they work for the government, and they examine patent applications to see whether it complies with the law. And if it doesn't, they'll issue reports saying the objections that stand, and they'll kind of examine them and eventually grant patents. So I started on that side, and then after I'd done that for 2 and a bit years, I became a patent attorney, which is what I do currently. Um, so I'll talk a bit more about the patent attorney role in particular, but if we've got time at the end, I can touch on some of the examiner stuff as well. So what exactly is a patent attorney? So they're essentially a legal professional that has a strong scientific background, and we work at this intersection between business, technology, and law, kind of where innovation is happening. So our job is to help inventors and companies to protect their innovations. So we essentially act as translators. We understand the science and the law, and we can help clients navigate that difficult process of getting a patent, which takes a long time and is quite complicated. So as most of you are probably aware, a patent is essentially a monopoly right that the government will grant you to stop other people from using your invention for up to 20 years. And in exchange, you have to give away enough information for people to understand how your invention works. And it helps to basically drive innovation forward by allowing companies to invest, say they wanted to develop a drug, they know that they can invest their money into doing that and that it will be protected and can't just be copied at the end of the time when they've gone through all the expense of the clinical trials and things. So it kind of drives forward innovation and incentivizes it. So it's a really good career choice for anyone that enjoys problem solving, writing, keeping in touch with kind of cutting edge of science and innovation without actually being in the lab itself. So why might it appeal to PhD students in particular? So you get to use your technical expertise and document analysis skills that you've built up over the years. You get to keep up with cutting edge tech. It's highly intellectually stimulating and challenging. Quite often I'll encounter scenarios that I've not seen before on a kind of regular basis, and it just keeps it fresh and exciting. There's a pretty structured career path as well. The work is impactful as obviously I work on things like vaccine tech or sustainable foods. So you can kind of see the real world implications of the work that your work's contributing to. Decent salary and reasonable work-life balance, which I'll caveat by saying for a lawyer. But in general, it's quite manageable. And there are diverse career options as well, whether you want to work at a law firm or whether you want to work in-house at a company, say at a tech company or a pharmaceutical company, there's options as well. So what does a typical day in my life look like? So the thing to note is that no 2 days are really the same, and week on week it can be quite different. There's a lot of client meetings, so this could be things like talking about their IP strategy generally, meeting with their investors and helping them secure funding, discussing a particular piece of work in detail, so getting technical input from the inventors if we've had a particularly challenging objection or something come up. A large chunk of it is obviously drafting and filing new patent applications. And then what we call prosecution. So that's getting those applications through to grant. So when we receive those reports from patent offices with objections, my job is to review them and the documents that they cited and come up with strategies and possible amendments or arguments we could make to kind of overcome them and get the patent granted. There's also a huge amount of kind of what we call contentious work. So this would either be defending my client's patent if a third party wants to attack it and try and get it knocked out or narrowed down, or alternatively, my client might be interested in getting rid of a competitor's patent. So we kind of do searches, look for documents that we could use to attack their patents with, or kind of, yeah, arguments that the patent office might not have considered. There's all sorts of things to do with innovation capture and trying to help companies spot inventions, giving them opinions on things. And then there's also, once you're on the register as an attorney, you need to do a certain amount of continuous professional development, so CPD. So I go to like legal events and webinars to keep up to date with the law. I also go to scientific conferences to kind of keep up to date with the field, but also to kind of network and make contacts in those fields. Because as you kind of progress through the career, there's an increasing emphasis on like business development and trying to win new work. So conferences is a great way of networking for that. I also do quite a bit of IP mentoring for startups as part of accelerator programs as well, which is really interesting to kind of see all their innovative ideas. So in terms of the qualification route, so the first thing to note is that it's mandatory to have a STEM degree to become a patent attorney. And the rationale behind that is they think it's easier to teach the legal principles to a scientist than it is to try and get lawyers to deal with kind of hardcore science. The training is basically on the job, so you'd work on real cases as soon as you get your trainee position. Most UK firms would want you to dual qualify, so that means qualifying as a UK patent attorney as well as a European one. And that does involve quite a lot of exams, usually. So the routes to qualification are listed there, and it's usually between 10 and 15 exams, depending on which route you take for the UK qualification. Excuse me, sorry. Most firms are quite supportive in the training process, so they'll often run, if it's a larger firm, in-house tutorials to kind of help you. The body that does the exams is called SEPA, and they put on seminars that you can attend. There's also external revision courses, usually a 2-day course per exam, and the firms will pay for those and give you time off to go to those. They'll also give you some study leave for the exam itself, but it does involve quite a bit of studying in your own time in those early few years. It usually takes 3 to 5 years to qualify, depending on how quickly you want to sit the exams. So in terms of career progression and work environment, there's 2 main ways to be a patent attorney. There's private practice, which is what I do, which means you work at a law firm and you have a range of different clients that you support and handle their IP portfolios. Or the other side is you work in-house at the company directly. So you might work at, say, AstraZeneca on a specific project, on a specific technology. There are pros and cons to both of them. In general, private practice is more kind of client focused and you have less control over the workflow and it's pretty deadline heavy. It's interesting because you get to work across a wide breadth of technology. There is options to kind of specialize as you get more mature, either by like specific areas you want to work in or specific parts of the law that you want to work within. There's also, you've got a lot of attorneys around you to help you through your training and to learn from, which is quite useful, particularly in your early years. But it can be more stressful. There's pressures of billable hours. In-house, on the other side, you've kind of got more of a commercial focus to your practice. You'll interact with lots of different areas of the business, so R&D, finance, legal, etc. You often do less of the nitty-gritty prosecution work, which some people see as a benefit, but during training that can be a bit difficult. That sort of work is often outsourced to a private practice law firm, and you just kind of manage the overall seeing of it. So it's quite different. And the other thing to mention is it's more on site as well. So if you wanted to be able to work from home, private practice might be a better option. So here's some of the key traits for success. It's mostly like analytical thinking and attention to detail, problem solving, being able to be adaptable, so being able to pick up things because often urgent things will come in and kind of derail your day. Yeah, time management, etc. And communication is a key one as well. So my top tips for transitioning from academia. So it is competitive to get into. So my advice would be to apply to a lot of different firms if you can, and to tailor the cover letter and CV to show that you're interested in that firm and that you've researched that firm. I was involved in our latest trainee recruitment round, and there were a couple of CVs that mentioned that they had a keen eye for detail, but then they gave the values of one of our competitor firms, which we thought was quite amusing. If you can, try and get internship or shadowing. Historically, this has been quite difficult, but I'm seeing an increasing number advertised now on the IP Careers website and also on some of the individual patent firm websites as well. If you can, try and find yourself a mentor. So there's a website called Careers in Ideas who will link you up with mentors who are usually kind of mid-level attorneys who are partway through their career, and they'll be happy to kind of review your CV, give you tips on your cover letter, etc. And the other tip would be to try and go to some free networking events if you can. So when I was applying, I went to an event called IP in Healthcare that was put on by one of the patent firms, and that just shows you've got an interest in it, and it kind of gives you some conversation pieces that you can use in your interviews or even in your cover letter, or and also just build your general network if you can connect with them on LinkedIn and things. So patent examining, just a very quick touch on that. So that is a civil service role. And as I mentioned, it's searching and examining patents for compliance with the law and then issuing reports, which attorneys will then respond to. It's got many of the same skill set as a patent attorney. And when you first join, there's an 8-week in-depth training program that gives you kind of basics of IP and searching for patents and things. And then it's followed by on-the-job training where your work would be supervised by a senior examiner. The key benefits are the work-life balance is incredibly good and it's pretty low stress. They're very open to flexible working, so working from home, or you can do your hours anytime between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. to kind of fit your schedule. There's some salary info there for the examiner side of things, but that is from 2023, so it's a bit out of date now. And then I've also got, I can share these slides afterwards, but here's some resources if you are thinking about getting into the career that you might find useful as well. And yeah, so I'm happy to take any questions kind of at the end. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was really, really good. I know some more people have joined us, so just a quick summary. Any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or the chat function, and we'll try to answer them as this presentation continues going on. We will be taking audible questions at the end if we have any time. We are recording and we do plan to distribute the recording maybe on YouTube or something, but we will figure that out, don't you worry. But I think that was a great conversation, or at least start of a conversation. I think it's a great segue going into commercial law, which Kende will be covering.
Everyone, thanks so much for taking the time. And thanks, Laura. I think that was actually super interesting for me just to even learn about the other kind of side you can use law and how it intersects with other industries. So by way of background, my name is Kende Oyebola, and I am an associate at Norton Rose Fulbright, which is a corporate law firm in the city. So I will start by giving an introduction to myself and how I got into law. Then I can kind of talk you through how to get into corporate law generally. Then I'll talk through the training process, the qualification process, the exams and things you kind of need to get to the qualified stage, and then key skills and the day-to-day structure, as well as some pros and cons as well at the end, just for your knowledge as well. So by introduction, I study history at the University of Nottingham, and I started that in 2016, and I graduated back in 2019. At the time, I actually thought I wanted to pursue academia, so I was on track to do my master's in history and then go on to do further study and potentially look at doing a PhD as well. But my tutor at the time, my supervisor for my dissertation, had actually said, have you considered corporate law? I think the skills that you have picked up on your history degree could be quite transferable and you may enjoy it. And from that point, I started to do a few open days just to get a bit more insight into what that industry was like, because it was something that was completely new to me. And that's exactly what I did. So the first stepping stone that many people take to get into corporate law is to go on open days or insight days, which lots of law firms in the city offer. And then following that, you typically would apply to a vacation scheme. And a vacation scheme is normally a week to a 3 week internship program that firms run. And off the back of that internship, you can then convert that offer into a full-time training program at the firm. And that's something that I did. So I did a vacation scheme at my firm back in 2021, and I converted that into a full-time training program offer, which I started in 2023. So in between 2021 and 2023, lots of people often ask, what are you doing for 2 years? You've got an offer to start a job, but you don't actually start until 2 years later. Well, in that in between, what you typically do, assuming that people on the call haven't studied law as their undergrad, you would have to do the GDL, which is the graduate diploma law conversion, for a year. Sometimes you can do the accelerated program, which ends up being about 7 to 8 months, but you'll do the GDL. And then after that, you'll go on to study the solicitor's qualification exam, which is called the SQE. And this is a new program that was introduced about 2.5 years ago in an effort to democratize access to the law. So then you will study that program as well. As part of the SQE, you can have up to 15 exams as part of that. And then after that, you join your firm where you start your training, which would often be a couple of months later. And that's the stage I just finished. So in terms of the training program structure, you typically have 4 seats. And if you are applying to a corporate law firm, it's typically mandatory that you will sit in a corporate seat. So this will be corporate M&A usually, which would be mergers, acquisitions, learning how deals are kind of formed, the transaction management side of things. And then you typically also have to do a banking or a finance seat. And then you have the option to do other 2 seats wherever you would like. As part of the training program at corporate law firms, you also have the option to go on international secondment or a client secondment. And as part of my training program, I went on international secondment, and I was based in Dubai for 6 months, which was a really amazing opportunity. And whilst I was out there, I focused on complex construction and arbitration disputes. So it was something completely different, but honestly, I was just grateful to be in Dubai and in the sun. So yes, that's another pro about corporate law, which I'll touch on later. So in terms of the seats that I did corporate finance, then I went to Dubai for 6 months, and then I did project finance, which is another type of financing seat. So as you can see, I was very interested in banking and finance, and that's the team that I decided to qualify into. And I qualified into this team about 2 months ago. So I'm still fairly new. But yeah, so far it's been so good. And then in terms of day-to-day tasks that you can expect to do at the junior level within a banking and finance team in a corporate law firm, typically deals are set up almost like a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in terms of the beginning, what you can expect to do, it would be things like completing company search checklists, which is essentially an inventory about the company, um, who are the shareholders, who are the directors, do they have any charges or mortgages or loans outstanding? You would typically complete that checklist. And then in the middle of transaction, you would sort of draft what we call corporate authorities, which allows the company to enter into the corporate transaction that you're talking about. And these would be things like board minutes, shareholder resolutions. And then towards the end of the transaction, we would typically have to prepare a legal opinion. And this is normally delivered to your client if you are advising a lender on the deal. And it essentially says that all the documents are in order. These are the things we found out about the company. These are the things you should be aware of. And it's almost like a report about the company and the transaction, um, and things like that. So that's kind of just a brief overview on terms of what you can expect day to day, very generally. Just to touch on the key skills that I think are very transferable to the world of corporate law, it'll be things like teamwork. So at my firm, we have over 50 offices around the world, and we are never just working on a UK or London-based deal. we're often working with different deals. At the moment, for example, I'm working with the Bahamas, which is amazing. Unfortunately, I don't get to go there and help them out. I have offered, but I'm working with the Bahamas, I'm working with Dubai, I'm working with Singapore, Cayman Islands, and then you have other European jurisdictions as well. So I think it's good because you're able to see how things operate in different jurisdictions. So because of that reason, teamwork is definitely important, especially because you're going to be managing different time zones and all those kind of things. I think another key skill to have at the junior level is proactivity as well, because lots of the seniors on the matter, so for example, the partners or the senior associates are often very, very busy drafting the actual document. And sometimes all they need is a trainee and associate that can ask, is there anything I can help with this? Would you like me to make a start on X or Y? And even if you don't 100% know the answers to what you're trying to do, that proactivity is always really, really well received. And then the last thing I would say, which I think Laura also touched on, is attention to detail. Sometimes when you're reviewing documents or contracts or even shareholder resolutions, it's often the trainee or the junior that's able to pick out a mistake and be like, oh, I think I've spotted an error here, that always stands them in really, really good stead. And then moving on to the pros and cons of being a corporate lawyer. So as I touched on earlier, the pro I would say would be the international working environment. It's quite standard, I would say. You get to go on international secondment for a minimum of 6 months up to 2 years. The deals and transactions you're working on are also very multi-jurisdictional and global. You'll also be working with clients that you hear about day to day, such as EasyJet, Coca-Cola. And it's interesting to have an insight into what those businesses are kind of doing day to day, and then we kind of see those impacts in the news. That's quite interesting. And then I would say the pay benefits are also quite good and it's stable. So at a corporate law firm as a trainee, you could typically be earning, I would say, a minimum of 50,000 up to maybe 70,000 if you're at a US law firm. And then upon qualification at a corporate law firm, you will be expected to be on six figures and upwards. So I think in terms of that, it's quite a nice pay package. And of course, if you're working in Dubai, that's also tax-free. So you have that. And then the cons, I would say, would be the hours and the work-life balance. It seems that you can't have everything all at one go sometimes. And I think the drawback of working on international deals is sometimes even if the day is quite late for you in the UK, maybe the US have just started their day. And so that can mean you're working on things quite late, sometimes after midnight. But then bearing in mind for the other jurisdictions you're working on, like Bahamas, for example, they're a couple of hours behind, so their day still hasn't ended. So sometimes that means you can be working quite long hours. But I think on the whole, you're never doing it alone. You're always in a team, which goes back to the teamwork point I mentioned. So yeah, I think that's just a brief summary of what it's like being a junior in a corporate law environment, and I hope it was useful, and I welcome any questions at the end.
All right, thank you so much, Kehinde. I think it's quite interesting to hear your experience, specifically getting to try all of these cross-border deals. Going to Dubai sounds very exciting. And I also think it's important to remember, if you really enjoyed Laura's talk about intellectual property, you can also do intellectual property at a commercial law firm, but it does slightly differ. So if anyone does want to find out the differences between the two, then maybe you can pose that question towards the end or in the chat. We will now move on to Anjali, who works as a product owner in Barclays. So still kind of in this finance sphere, but do remember that there's product owning in multiple different industries, not just the financial services, but of course, Anjali's based in the financial services. So yeah, over to Anjali.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen because I did prepare a deck. There we go. Is that working? Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, it's working.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Cool. So get started.
It has swapped the screens around though, so we can see the one with the
presenter.
note. Yes.
Let me just change that. Give me a second. gosh, this is lagging a bit. Sorry guys, I do work in tech. Always the case, but
It's absolutely okay. It always happens, especially when you need it to work. It just
I
decides.
know. Okay, is that a bit better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So yes, as mentioned, I do work for Barclays as a product owner. I work in fraud technology, and there are multiple roles in product across financial services, and outside financial services too. But I'll just give a little bit of background in terms of what I studied, my education, career highlights, etc. So I actually studied politics, which is a bit of a world away from where I've ended up. But as people may know, politics is versatile. Get like a lot of qualities that are transferable from that kind of degree. So after graduating, I actually joined a consultancy in financial services. So I was with Capgemini for about 2 years, which was a great experience because I got some hands-on knowledge on, well, financial services as a whole, having not worked on it. And also it's a great place to start if you don't really know what you want to focus on, because they just give you a bunch of different clients and you're able to jump around between roles as well, but still be obviously part of an organization. So I've worked with like 3 different clients in my time at Capgemini. So one of them was Swift, which is like the international payments body. And I've also worked with HSBC for a little bit. And then my last client was Barclays. And then I moved internally to Barclays, which is what I do at the moment. So I'll just run through a quick introduction of what is a product owner and what are the why is it important to be a product owner. So it's a key role in agile teams. Agile is like the term that is used in a lot of tech industries now. It basically outlines moving away from like a waterfall model where technically in the past you develop a little bit, wait for that to be developed, test it, then it goes to the customer for feedback, and then you have to, if there's any change that needs to be made, it has to go back to the beginning for that, during that feedback loop again. With agile, it's a bit more you move more fluidly, you deliver little bits at a time, and then you get feedback as you go. The feedback that you get will then be implemented into the next sprint or phase that will be worked on, and then it just keeps going like in little cycles like that. Essentially, a product owner guides the team on what to build and why to build it. They act as a bridge between the business stakeholders, customers, and the development team. So when I say development team, it's like engineers, devs, and they ensure that the team delivers features and improvements that align with business goals and user needs. So it's important to be a product owner because it ensures that the company or the bank, in my case, is maximizing value, creating clarity and driving alignment. As you can see in these diagrams, like the product owner is kind of the center of it all, ties together, like I've mentioned, the bridge between like the technical side and also the business side. So you need to have like a mindset in both, be good at like kind of translating requirements from business to technical and explaining technical back to like the business stakeholders. So I'll quickly run through a day in the life of a product owner. So we've got some core responsibilities that includes defining the product vision and goals. So this sets a clear vision for the product and communicates it to the team and the wider stakeholders. We manage a product backlog. So this could include like prioritizing what's in the backlog, maintaining a list of features, which are features that will be worked upon. And also, just to mention, I should have mentioned at the beginning, a product can be anything as simple as like something like a banking application or a mobile application or something a bit more technical, like an interface that, for example, disputes management people own. And if you've, for example, got a dispute that you're raising and you call into the call center, that UI that they develop, that needs a product owner too, right? So it goes anything from external to internal facing too. So also to go on the core responsibilities, we represent stakeholders, act as a voice of the customer too, prioritize work, like I mentioned before, And collaboration is a big one. We collaborate with the team, work with developers, work with the business, work with solution architects, data architects, testing teams, etc. And also we have the responsibility of accepting deliverables. So at the end of all this development work, when it's done, it would have to be showcased to the product owner, and we'd have to then accept it as completed based on evidence that they've come up with. Some key skills that will be good: stakeholder management, requirement elicitation, so clear, concise requirements, decision making, being able to be adaptable, like I mentioned before, especially important in the new agile ways of working. Also have a customer focus. And up here in the diagram, you can see, like, this is the typical backlog, will be like a list of things. This will then be broken down into an epic or a feature, which is a feature that is looking to be delivered in something like a 3 to 6 month period, sometimes more. This would basically deliver value or a stream of income or revenue to the business. This then gets broken down into smaller things, which are called user stories, which a developer would pick up, and they'll complete that typically within, it depends the size of the user story. Some could be 1 day, some could be 8 days, some could be a week. And then could be broken down again further into bugs, tasks, and other technical issues to solve. So I'll just quickly go over some routes into how to become a product owner and career progression as well. There is no specific route. I mean, as you've heard from my background, like I studied politics, became a consultant in financial services, found I enjoyed product, I enjoyed business analyst, and it led me to product too. So previous experiences, most people, they tend to like come from the business analyst job family. Like myself, I was business analyst for some time. Product analyst, again, same sort of job family there. Some people transition from project manager to a PO. Some people come from like a scrum master to a PO. But really, you do need a solid understanding of the agile methodology because it's widely used in quite a lot of product development teams. And going forward, common career progression paths, I'd say a senior or lead product owner. That's quite common. That's more like a 2 to 3 years. You could quite easily progress to that. Following that, product manager, and they will typically own or look after product owners underneath them. Following that, you have a product director which looks at possibly multiple different products in the customer journey, and the product managers and POs will also sit under them. And then obviously the kind of the top head of product, you've got a vice president of product as well. That is like the highest level of product strategy and management there. But yeah, that was all from me. If you do have any questions, as mentioned, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can ask after the session. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjali. It was very interesting hearing how you kind of got into the career not really knowing much before, coming from consulting. I feel like that does tend to be quite a common theme when you go to these kind of career talks. A lot of people end up somewhere where they didn't realize they would be, or it's not where they set out to end up in. But it sounds like a really great place to be.
Yeah, definitely it is. And I'd say like the work-life balance is quite good as well, just to add on top of that. So
Yeah.
it's a great place.
That's fantastic. Someone else I know who didn't expect to end up in the career that she's in is Abigail Ochere, who I'll pass to now, who works in communications as a medical writer.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen as well. Okay. My screen. Yes, my name is Abigail. I am a medical writer. I'm also a co-founder of an organization called System, and our colors are pink, so hence all the pink branding. And we're an organization to get more women into the STEM field, so particularly Black women. And but today I'll be talking about my medical writing journey, from being a scientist, so being on the in the lab, now as a medical writer. So my journey started off with my undergraduate degree in biomedical science. And it's funny that this diagram is kind of like a curved road, but actually my journey wasn't a curved road, as Malia just mentioned. It was very unexpected. There was a lot of ups and downs, quite a few shut doors as well, that has led me to where I am today. So yeah, I started off doing biomedical science because I didn't get into medicine. And I did biomedical science at Roehampton University. And then I tried for medicine again. I didn't get in another time, the second time. And I, by force, went to do a master's because my mum told me that I couldn't stay at home and just sit down with no plan. So I did a master's in neuroscience, and actually chose neuroscience because I was really interested in the brain during my biomedical science degree. And yeah, I felt like that was, if anything I could do out of my biomedical science, that was one thing that I was more interested in. And then so I did that for a year, and then after that I started to see that actually there is a career outside of medicine, and there is research is also a credible career, and I think it was more suited to me. So I set out to start looking for lab jobs, and actually wasn't really successful in getting lab jobs. And I eventually got a role, but it wasn't in the lab. It was in a data management team as a data entry associate. And at the time, I was really desperate for a job, so I just said yes. And they told me that I could, work my way around and like move to the labs. So I just said, yeah, let me just go for it. So I had no idea what clinical trials really, well, I mean, I learned about it in my undergrad and my master's, but I didn't really know too much about the industry. But yet I worked there for just about 2 years in the clinical trials industry. So I worked at this organization, clinical research organization called hVivo. Then I moved on to work in an organization called St. Stephen's AIDS Trust. So they're working on HIV studies as a clinical trial administrator. But then now that doesn't actually exist anymore, but it was based in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And while I was there, I just felt like everybody that was doing all the fun stuff, so all the people that were basically running the trials, all the people at the top, they all had something I didn't have, which was a PhD. And at the time, I didn't really actually know anyone who had a PhD. I didn't know the process. I didn't know how long it was going to take. But I said, I'm going to do that just because I want to be at the top. So, and also another thing is I did really miss the lab. So although I really liked working in clinical trials, I did miss the science, because most of the time we were looking at data, we were looking at more about recruitment of patients, and I just missed actually being in the science. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and do a PhD. And I did my PhD at Aston University. So my PhD was in aging. So apart from obviously the brain, I was very interested in diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and just how the brain works. So aging, these are all age-related diseases, and it was no brainer that I would do a PhD on that kind of subject. So I did that, and then my project was looking at how we could basically make people live healthier during old age. And so it was very lab heavy. It was 3 years, but because of pandemic, I had to do an extra year. And eventually, when I came out of my PhD, I was like, I don't want to work in a lab anymore, which was really weird for me because I used to love the lab. But during that time, the thing that I loved the most, I just started to dislike it. And I was like, out of everything in my PhD, I actually really enjoyed presenting. I liked speaking with people. Although at first I was quite nervous and quite like, I wasn't really confident enough to speak, I've eventually liked that side of it. So I was like, I wanted a job that basically does that. But I didn't know what it was. And I basically did a Google search, and it was like, I need a job. Well, I just said jobs outside of the lab with a PhD, basically. And as basic as that is, first thing that came up was medical writing. So yeah, I started applying for medical writing roles, and I finally landed my role, which I'm currently have been in since 2021. So 4 years this November. And so it's a medical writer role, but it's also, in our company, we call it a medical communications manager, or associate medical communications manager / medical writer. But I'll talk more about that in the next slides. And then in 2022, I also co-founded an organization with my sister to get more women, particularly Black women, into the STEM field. And I also lecture as well, which sometimes I forget to mention. But I also lecture at the University of West London. So these are just a few photos of my journey so far with my team, and also with some of the things with my PhD and being in the lab. And I put a picture of mentioned a bit about as well. So during my my current role, I also get to travel. So what is medical writing? Well, first of all, the basics of medical writing is that you're taking the complex and the most complicated information, science information, medical information, and you're making that basically easier and more, I guess, understandable for a specific audience, whoever's taking that information in. For me, as I work for a medical communications agency, Accepta Medica, which is under the Delphi Group, and we work with pharmaceutical clients. So we basically are the middle person between the pharmaceutical clients and healthcare professionals. So, well, mainly healthcare professionals, but sometimes it might be the public, it might be different stakeholders. It depends on the projects you're working on. But for me, I work mostly with the doctors, trying to educate doctors on new drug treatments, new drug treatments by the pharmaceutical clients. And basically I work more in events. So there is two sides of our of Accepta Medica. There's the publishing side, and then there is the communication side. So the publishing side, they work more on abstracts and conferences, doing posters and things like that. And that's the side that when I started applying for medical writing roles, those were the first kind of roles I started to apply for. But as I was doing the assessments for those roles, I realized that I wasn't really interested in that side. So it was more, like they'll give you maybe some journals and they'll say, write an abstract from the journal, write the abstract for this. And although I liked writing, I was like, oh, no, I need something more where it involves actually like, more creative, I guess. And that's where the medcom side comes in. So we're more on the medical education, more on the creative and interactivity kind of side. So as I said, did my PhD, which I guess is probably and also the work that I did in clinical trials, but I didn't have much work experience in terms of before I landed my first medical writing role. But now I've got 4 years experience in it. And one thing I do love about medical writing is that you get to work on so many different therapeutic areas. So you're never just working on one thing. So although during my PhD, I was working on a very niche area and I became an expert in that very niche area. But with this, I'm learning about so many different fields. So I've worked on oncology, depression and epilepsy, chronic cough, skin cancer. I'm currently working on IBD, so gastro. Like it's just it's just a lot, basically. And you just learn, you become an expert in someone else's field, and you have to do it very quickly because there's client deadlines, there's you know, team is dependent on it, and you can't really spend a whole year trying to research about a project. Like sometimes within a week, you need to quickly get it. And that's where PhD comes in handy, because you're able to, you understand the science, you understand, you know how to read papers, you know how to read data, but it's actually goes one step ahead of more than that. It's also, how do I make that information clearer, more understandable, better for people to basically understand and retain the information, because these are the doctors that are going to have to treat the patients in clinic. So yeah, and then it's very client facing, and that's probably the side of the role that I wasn't expecting, although I said I wanted to like talk to people and stuff like that. But I felt like the client facing or client management side more was yeah, basically the part that I struggled with at first, because you have to learn how to work with so many different clients. Some are very difficult. Even today I had a very difficult client call. So some are very difficult, but it's a skill that you kind of learn on the job rather than, but I think as a PhD student, I had a lot of resilience. So when I do get faced with really difficult clients, I kind of like hone in into that kind of experience that I have. And how my day looks as a medical communications manager. So most of the time working on client deliverables, because it's a client service. So create slide decks, post-meeting reports. So basically we'll do an event, for example, if it's let's say it was a symposium for a bigger, let's say congress or conference, we would basically plan that event. Like the pharmaceutical pharma clients will come to us and say, like, we have this idea, like we want to present at this congress, like, help us basically to do that. So we have to basically plan it from what's the agenda, so what is going to be shown, and whether it's what speakers. Sometimes they might have their own speakers already in mind, but sometimes they don't, and they just want you to find like the speakers who will come, who's the best expert in the field to talk. And then sometimes so apart from the slide decks that will be presented at the event, you'll have post-meeting reports, post-meeting materials. Sometimes it's newsletters to basically say what happened. So it's quite diverse in terms of the deliverables that we have to give, and it's always dependent on the client. And then we also have e-learning platforms as well that I do, and these are more of like games. That's how the easiest I can describe it. So we basically start with a storyboard. Well, we start with an idea, and then of the content that the client wants the doctors to know. Then we create basically a whole gaming platform from scratch, working with developers and designers to do that. And then it will go live, and the doctors can actually train themselves, or whoever the healthcare professionals are can train themselves on to basically get up to speed on a particular drug or a disease. And then medical education events, that's what I just mentioned earlier, and we have a lot of client calls, depending. So I would usually work on maybe 2 to 3 projects at a time, depending on how big the project is. So different clients, different time zones as well. So for example, now I'm working with the Asia Pacific, a branch of a pharma company. So our times are different. Sometimes I work with American clients. So yeah, that's one part of the job. One part of the job, if you don't like to, if you like your sleep, sometimes it might be a bit difficult. And then also working with pitches as well. So sometimes they might have a new business that the company's trying to pitch, and they'll can ask you to work on like creating maybe a presentation, or just helping out finding out what we've already done as a company and what we can really showcase to new businesses. And who do I work with? So other medical teams. So in our team, we usually have other MCMs. So maybe sometimes 2 or 3. You have senior ones, you have the mid-level, depends. And another thing I didn't mention actually is my company, they actually don't hire anyone without a PhD. But they do in like other roles like project management, but for the medical communications managers, they don't. But in other companies, they do have roles, entry level medical writers, and they do accept medical writers with masters or undergraduate. Just to put that in there. I also work with program directors, medical directors who have more of an oversight in terms of budget, in terms of the actual medical content, and more there to just there to support studio team and developers to create something like an e-learning platform, and even something like a newsletter. We do have to work with the studio team to actually design that once we've put in the content in. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky, because apart from communicating science to doctors, you also have to communicate science to developers and studio who do not have a science background. So how do you explain to them that I want you to create this DNA strand, and this molecule needs to be shown, and like you have to be able to explain it to them well. And sometimes there's a bit of back and forth in terms of understanding that. And then work with a lot of freelancers, so that could be editing. So although we're meant to QC our own work and edit our own work, we do have dedicated editors who would do that before we send anything to the client, and before anything is finalized, basically the slide decks. Then we have the client, and these are usually big pharma companies, and sometimes different stakeholders are involved. So as I said, I work for the Asia, one of my clients is the Asia Pacific branch, and I work with Japan team, Korea, China, sometimes. So and all these people on the call, and all these people have opinions as well. So it can be a lot like that. And then healthcare professionals. So when we actually do we're planning an event, we will have like the speakers, we'll have to communicate with them, brief them on the actual, what we want them to speak about, the slides, we do a slide review with them. So there's a lot of people involved in a project, and it will also depend on the project. And sometimes we even work with patient advocacy representatives as well, depending on the gender. So some important skills that would be good for anyone that is interested in medical writing. Attention to detail is very key. Although I said that we do work with, we have editors and things, but sometimes because of the short time some of these deadlines are, so sometimes clients can be, someone would say, unreasonable. Sometimes it could, like, within a day or two, they want this slide deck to be done, and sometimes it's like 100 slides. You have to be able to correctly and accurately, present that work without having so many mistakes, and sometimes you don't have too much time to even QC the work. But we do try to tell them that we also need to give enough time for like our editors and things. But attention to detail is very important, and we do a lot of reviewing the developers' work and all that. And most of the time as well, and this is something I didn't know too much about the job, at the end of the day, it's a business. Our time is money. So we have to be able to be efficient in the time. So we can't spend hours and hours doing one task, even though it might take hours and hours for a normal person, but we have to really do things quickly. And teamwork, as everyone has mentioned about teamwork, it's very important, I think, in most roles, actually. But yeah, especially coming from a PhD where it was very independent and I was just by myself, kind of stuck in the lab by myself. Now I'm having to communicate with so many people, and the work I do has a ripple effect on on the team and also on the client as well. So really effective. You have to really communicate with your team. And having a science background, definitely, and as I said, in our company, you would have to have a PhD. Creativity, very key as well, because we're the first ones to come up with the ideas. You can talk with the studio team, but you're the first one to actually, spark that idea, and and then they'll help you flesh that out. communication and client management I've talked about already, and writing. I mean, at the end of the day, we're writers, we're writing, whether it's a report, whether it's even an e-learning platform, there's all text. So I think doing a PhD with 75,000 words really gives that background and for you to do that. And then problem solving. Sometimes the things happen, you know, either on site. So I did in the beginning talk a little bit about traveling. So these events, usually they're in nice places. So you get to go to different conferences in different parts of the world. And sometimes on site while you're there, you might have encounter problems. Somebody's slides are not working. Someone didn't show up. Anything could really happen. So you have to be really quick on how to solve problems, and really give the client, make sure that you know the client knows that you know what you're doing, basically. And resilience, as I said earlier, you know, sometimes clients can be difficult. Sometimes you have very, very tight deadlines, and sometimes as well it can be overwhelming. But the good thing I love about this role is that you have a team around you. It's never put on just one person, or it shouldn't be put on one person. It's usually a team, collective effort. If even the project managers, sometimes they might not have a science background, but they will even help where they can. So everyone is trying to have this goal so we can meet the deadlines. So yeah, I would say these are the kind of main skills, and anyone kind of doing a science degree kind of learns these skills, but I think main ones are communication, because you can't be quiet on the client calls. You have to be able to effectively talk with them. But yes, I think that is yes, that's all my
Thank
slides.
you so much, Abigail. I think from hearing everyone speaking today, I've learned actually a lot about all of you, and I've learned at least one thing that I didn't know about you guys before. So very, very interesting. We are quite tight for time. We've only a couple of minutes left. So I will just dive into the questions, just attacking it in order as they came. So Abigail asked, towards Laura, did you have any prior work experience in civil service and finding it really difficult to progress through the application stage for civil service?
No, that was my first role in the civil service. I know that they have quite a lot of they call them like success profile frameworks. So I think they focus a lot on like behaviors and like competency-based questions. So if you don't answer the questions on the application form in the formulaic way that they like, basically kind of evidence-based behaviors and examples of where you've done it, then sometimes you could kind of get screened out on that basis. But there's quite a lot of resources online about how to respond to those type of questions.
Thank you, Laura. Adidayo asks, why did you choose to move into the patent attorney side from examination end? And did you find you get to do a lot of team working? A lot of work seems quite independent, i.e. reading and responding to patents. And thank you for signposting the IP website for the internship opportunities. Does your firm offer internships or shadowing that you know of?
Yeah, so for the first one, I'd always wanted to be an attorney ultimately. And then when I was writing up my PhD thesis, I applied to a host of jobs. I did interview for a couple of attorney ones at that time, but didn't get them. And then I got offered the one at the UK IPO. So I thought I'll do that for a few years and kind of see the other side of the fence to kind of set me up with a good background in IP and see it from both sides almost. And then once I'd kind of got comfortable there, that was when I started applying again. In terms of the team working, you're right, it is a lot of independent work, but there are elements of team working. So for most of the clients that we work on, we have like a client-based team, and we'll always be working together on like the overall IP strategy. When you're training, you're usually assigned to a partner to work under. So all of your work will be reviewed and you can chat to them about different cases. And then some of the work I mentioned that we do some work on like attacking other people's patents, opposition type work, that is a lot of kind of quite team based, where multiple people will be involved in writing one big document, because there it's good to get a lot of different opinions or kind of fresh perspectives. But yeah, a lot of the work is quite independent, but I feel like there is enough interaction to kind of satisfy me, I think. And then obviously like interacting with clients and things as well is always good. In terms of the shadowing, I think my firm does something called the Summer of IP. They do some events, I think once a year. This year it's already happened, but it's worth looking out on. I think it's usually advertised on our LinkedIn and our website, but there's definitely one around summertime that does go on every year.
Fantastic. Adedayo also congratulates Kehinde on your qualification and asks, now that you're qualified, do you know what the career trajectory or progression for you would be and the timeline for that? And how do you find managing / balancing your knowledge and understanding of banking and finance alongside your knowledge of law and new developments in each areas?
Thank you, Adedayo. Appreciate it. Thanks for the congratulations. I think one of the benefits as well I didn't mention of law, I think the corporate laws, that the progression is kind of transparent. So I would say your first year you are newly qualified, so you're a junior. I would say up to the first 3 years you're still a junior associate. Then 4 to 5 years you're looking at a mid-level associate, and then normally when you're 6, 7 years in, you're a senior associate. And then anything above that, you'd probably be on the track to partner if that's something that you wanted to do. I know that a lot of people in my team as well, when they get to sort of the 2-3 year mark, they go on client secondment. So at a bank like HSBC, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, so they can kind of understand what we do from the client side. So I think in terms of career trajectory progression, those are some of the things I'm thinking of at the moment. As I say, it's only been 8 weeks for me so far. So very much enjoying the bubble I'm in. But I know that in a couple of years, I'll be looking at probably going on client secondment to a bank, and then looking at what my mid-level associate years would also look like. In terms of managing and balancing knowledge of banking and finance alongside the Black letter law, we do have lots of training sessions at my firm. So I would say maybe every 2 weeks, we have case law updates. So that would be updates from Black letter law. So cases that have gone to maybe any UK court, for example, the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal. And one of the practitioners, a senior practitioner, will kind of take us through the case, any key learnings for us, and things you need to bear in mind for the matters we work on. So that helps you keep up to date with the Black letter law. And in terms of the banking and finance side of things, we also have a banking academy. So once you're qualified, up to when you're 4 years qualified, is essentially an internal program where you learn all the basics of banking and finance, from drafting security documents, registering security, up to how do you negotiate with the other side. And that's kind of an idea of how we kind of build our knowledge at my firm. But I'm conscious lots of other questions as well, so happy to answer anything on LinkedIn as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for answering that question, Kehinde. I know that we are running over, so if any of the speakers need to leave or any participants, please feel free to do so. That is absolutely okay. As you guys have mentioned, you're happy for people to reach out via email or LinkedIn. If you are free to stay, then please also feel free to stay, because we're just going to wrap up on some of these questions. Okay, so moving on, Anjali, how would you say your work differs from project management? I know you said that there's an opportunity to transition from management to ownership, but there seems to be an overlap in the level of oversight, responsibilities, and management between the two roles.
Okay. Yeah, quite a common question in this kind of area, I'd say. So with project management, they kind of look at internal facing. So it's more like giving updates on timelines to stakeholders, when the project's going to be delivered, looking at sort of questions like that. But as a product owner, more customer facing, we need to deliver what the customer wants to them, deliver value, deliver like business goals and what they want. So I'd say that's more strategic in sense, and also that's more customer facing, working on the back of stuff like statistics, feedbacks, in order to like prioritize your backlog. A project manager doesn't really have like a backlog that they look after. They just make sure that the project that they're looking after runs to plan, happens, everything, all the milestones are like hit on time, and they create those reports for like steering committees or to their higher ups and internal stakeholders. But product owner is different, I'd say. Again, like I mentioned, a lot more customer centric, strategic in that sense as well. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Jessica asks, would you say working as a patent attorney is stressful? Does the stress level out after becoming fully qualified? I'm interested in the profession, however, the stress part does worry me a little.
I think it's not as stressful as some people lead you to believe. I'd say in terms of the qualification thing, I'd say like it takes more of your out of working hours time in the lead up to qualification, like just revising for those exams, does take a lot of time. And for me personally, I found that I enjoyed it a lot more once I had qualified, just because then you can kind of have it as a 9 to 5 almost. There are pinch points, particularly I think in private practice, where like a client comes to you and says, "Oh, these trial results are here. We need to press release them on Friday," type thing. And so you've got to kind of get your patent application together within those few days. So there kind of comes bottlenecks and peaks and troughs. But usually, like working at a big firm, because there's multiple biotech attorneys at my firm, it's quite easy to kind of farm off some of your other work if needed, when these pinch points come in. So I'd say if you're interested in the profession, then don't let that put you off. And also, if you truly are concerned about the stress, then the in-house option that I mentioned is notoriously like less stressful, as there's less kind of, you're aware of the big deadlines before they're happening, and you're able to use kind of external counsel to do some of the work as well. So I'd say don't let that deter you if you're interested in the profession.
Fabulous. And Larissa asked Hinde, thank you for sharing your experiences of corporate law. How could a PhD in a non-law related field be leveraged in corporate law? I did include some messages in the chat. I don't know if you've seen, but if you have any insight, I'm happy to share it with Larissa.
Just broadly speaking, because it's so competitive and firms get thousands of applications, it's sometimes really nice to see someone bring something different. In my team, someone who's joined 2 months ago, for example, who's working in cybersecurity full time, and he's now starting his training contract to be a lawyer. And at first, everyone was always like, okay, like, how did you leverage that? How did you sell it? But I think his main thing was that you've shown you were able to get to a certain level in another field. There's no reason why you can't do the same thing in law. And you pick up so many skills whilst doing a PhD, attention to detail, critical thinking, just being able to deal with the mass volume of things you have to get through. Those are things that are very applicable to corporate law. I think many people tell you doing a PhD is a lot harder than being a corporate lawyer as well. So I think you have lots of brownie points off the back of that. So I think definitely don't be put off at all by it. I think there's more positives than negatives coming from a PhD background and bringing that to law. And I wouldn't worry about feeling like you have to start again because you're gonna be a trainee. You kind of have to start at the bottom, if you like. At the end of the day, everyone has to start there and work their way up. Like I said, the person that left cybersecurity to join, he's had a whole new career that he started a couple months ago. So I think, yeah, there's nothing to be worried about from that perspective either.
That's brilliant. Okay, on the final 3 questions now. Abigail, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and insight into being an MCM in your company. When you say science background, can this include psychology?
Well, yes, I would think so, because psychology is, I think it's considered as a life science. Well, usually on the applications they'll say life science or related subjects. So I would, as long as you're able to show that you like to write, you can understand the science that you're about to learn. In most roles, especially if you're coming in on the entry level, they will be able to train you on the job. But as long as you can just show that you understand the scientific and data, and you're able to present that, because part of the interview will test that, whether you can actually understand complex data.
Okay, and then how did you all find the transition for those who were in academia? How did you find the transition to more industry spaces? Were there differences in culture, and how were you able to navigate these differences in these different spaces?
That's a good question. For me, I found it took a while. I did have a lot of habits from my PhD that I needed to break out of, and because one good thing was I was like, how after my PhD, how am I going to now do a job where I have to it'll be 9 to 5 because I can go to the lab when I wanted. But actually, my job starts at 9:30, so that kind of helped, and it was quite flexible as well in terms of. I mean, now it's a bit more because you have to go into office, but before then, it was very flexible. So, but it did take me a while because I would be at home and I would just be working as if I'm doing a PhD. But if you continue doing that while you're working, you would never burn out. So I had to like unlearn a lot of things that I learned from just being in academia. And as you said, yeah, it's very different in terms of the culture. But then also knowing that it's a team effort. I think when it's academia, sometimes it just feels like, oh, my research, my work kind of thing, and not really taking that ownership. And especially with something like medical writing, you sometimes have to make the slides and do all the content, and your name is nowhere on the on any of the publication or anywhere. So it's a bit different if that was in academia, you would really you'll fight for that. Your name has to be there. So yeah, I think it just took a while to kind of transition, but the transition was made easy by my company and also by the people around me.
Thank you so much for joining. Please look out for the Black PhD Collective's future webinars. This is our first of our series. We have plenty more coming up. We have financial planning, so how to manage your money as a PhD student with the stipend or part-time jobs you might have, career planning, how to have personal branding on LinkedIn and other social media platform sites. So we have a lot coming up for the rest of this year and 2026. So please follow our social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, and check out for our emails. Thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, guys.
Thank you.